From a political perspective, the world has changed. The world has changed dramatically in recent years. Our old ideas of globalization, the idea of a functioning world economy where commodities were increasingly liquid and location no longer mattered, is, I'm afraid, consigned to the history books. We're moving into a more compartmentalized world, a world of different spheres that may or may not compete with each other, but our resources are finite. And so those resources have to be delivered where they need to be used. That doesn't mean that Europe is at the end of the queue. We're still a large and important part of the world economy. Remember, there are 600-odd million people on the European continent, 450 million of whom are European Union citizens. We are not small. We use, however, a lot more raw materials than we produce. That's, to an extent, a matter of choice. We've exported our pollution, and we are importing raw materials. This is a consequence of our choices, and now we've decided to make different choices. As our suppliers have grown, as their own economies have developed, they themselves have moved. A small history lesson. Before the Cultural Revolution, China was an exporter of oil. Then it became an importer of oil. It was a producer and exporter of raw materials. It then became an importer of a lot of raw materials. I'll come back to the Chinese case in more detail in a moment. Today, China is producing more and more finished goods. We cannot expect the world to stand still simply because it suits our agenda and our history and our own opinions. China has moved forward. China's economy is completely unrecognizable from what it was 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. Our problem is that we are still dealing with political agendas, and I'm sad to say in many cases corporate agendas, that are out of date. We haven't learnt fast enough or enough to be able to cope adequately with the challenges in front of us. The Deputy Minister very correctly and commendably set out what we need to do. I'm not going to repeat anything from her speech. We do have the ability to change that status quo, but it's difficult. Europe is not without a mineral endowment. Anyone who says that Europe is mined out is simply ignorant of the truth. Europe produces, and my friend and colleague Mr. Latouros will be able to tell you this in far greater detail, large amounts of construction and other materials that it uses in vast quantities every day. Well over 20,000 quarries are functioning successfully in Europe today. There are rather less metal mines. When we talk about mining in Europe, we tend for some reason to focus on metal mines. The reason is that's where the value is. You may have 20,000 quarries, but the combined value of their production will be less than 2 or 3 large metal mines. And that channels directly into European manufacturing, finished and semi-finished goods. And that is what is critical to the European economy. Increasingly critical for the green and digital transition are the metals and minerals that we did not know we needed 10 years ago, what we call rare earths. And I can go into great detail of that, but the vast majority of those are mined either in or by China and delivered to worldwide by the Chinese. Increasingly, we are understanding that we have alternatives. Though it's, this is not a tale of woe, but we have to understand where we're starting from. We're starting from a position of Chinese dominance. Again, as the example I gave you, they've moved from producing these raw materials to actually deploying them.